So today I'm going to be doing a review of the FP Journe Elegante in Titalyt. This is going to be the first Journe I've taken a look at on the channel, and I do think it's a pretty interesting watch, and let's see what all the hype is about. As a side note, I'm going to have a link down to the Patreon below. I'm going to be using all funds for giveaways, and the first giveaway is going to be happening next week. So if you're interested, join, sign up. We're going to have a Discord group where we just talk watches and stuff, so hope to see you there. So we have a diameter of about 35.4, lug to lug of 39.5, height of just 7.4, and a lug width of 16 millimeters. Some other general specifications for this watch. Inside we have the caliber 1210. Some cool facts is it has a battery life of 8 to 10 years, and that's of daily use. Because this has a standby feature, when you put it down after 35 minutes, the hands will stop keeping time and they'll go back and resume it once you pick it back up. If you have it in standby mode, it has a estimated shelf life of 18 years. So realistically, if you're looking at wearing this in a rotation, you're looking at 10 to 18 years of battery life out of this thing, which is pretty cool. It also is accurate about plus or minus 15 seconds a month. We have 30 meters of stated water resistance with a screw-down crown. The watch is actually done in grade 5 titanium with this Titalyt proprietary coating on it, which is supposed to make it a little bit harder and a little bit more anti-corrosive. What's really cool is this entire white portion of the dial is pretty much pure Lume, so it's very good in the dark, and we'll be able to see that a little bit later. And last but not least, the watch retails, at least in 2024, directly from Journe for $16,500. Starting off of the dial here, and we have a very classic Journe. It is done with all the kind of calling cards of the railroads track. We have the sub-seconds here that is found on a lot of the Journe watches. Of course, the biomorphic handset done in this heat bluing. It is unmistakably a Journe from first glance, but because it is a quartz watch and because it really almost is a sports watch, it has things that feel different, namely the K-shape, namely the kind of outer portion of the dial, which feels a little bit more brutalist, which feels a little bit more made to the task and not as elegant as some of their dressier pieces, even down to this full loomed dial, which is just rarer to see. The most interesting, and I think probably most glaring thing about this dial is the little cutout here at the 4 o'clock, which is done for this rotor. The rotor is connected to the mechanism in a way where if you move, it senses it. Of course, the rotor shakes around, and if the watch is in standby mode, any movement to this rotor will wake it up. The watch, when woken up, will go back to the correct time. It's kind of interesting because although the handset is not moving down to the seconds hand not moving, there is a microprocessor inside which still keeps track of the time. It's just a lower power mode to help preserve the battery, and that's very cool. It's very interesting to see it go back and snap back to the correct time, and it's kind of just a quirk of the watch, which is unique. Sure, there are, let's say G-Shocks that do it in a very similar manner, but what's interesting about the Journe, it actually will go either to the right or to the left, whichever is closest to the current time, and the handset is actually separated from the seconds hand. They actually have two different motors driving them, so they actually go in different patterns depending on what time you're getting to, and I believe the hour and minute hand gets set first, and then the second hand after, which is pretty cool. What I do really love about this dial is, one, the glossiness of the base white-ish dial texture itself. Something to note, and I don't know how well this will come across on camera, but the dial itself isn't the purest of white. We can tell pretty good here how much brighter and whiter the Cartier appears next to the Journe, which is a little bit more of this dullish greenish white, mainly because that Luminova backing to it, or that the fact that it's made out of this Lume substance. But anyway, I do love the glossiness of the base dial itself, how raised the numerals are. You can definitely tell it if you just angle it slightly. They rise up off and have this beautiful inky black texture to them, right down to the Journe text as well. But I think surprisingly the best thing about this watch is how much depth they've built in. It's really just over 7 millimeters, but they built in so much depth here. There technically is like 3 layers, being the base dial pattern itself, this kind of grayed out portion on the 12 and 6 o'clock side, and then the lighter gray, more metallic looking portion on the 3 and 9, which is another step above that. It's just, there's so much depth that they secretly built in here. It's like the closer you look, the more you see, and you know, you can kind of tell where some of the money went. There's a lot of engineering, a lot of R&D, and a lot of attention to design put into this watch to make it more than just a boring quartz watch. I think it's a very clean dial, looks great, and I love that they just have the classic Journe text that they have on all their watches. They didn't do anything different, like say quartz or say, you know, something weird on the watch. It is almost treated no differently. So zooming in on the dial here, and again, we can just see how beautifully done the text is. Very inky, a nice three-dimensional quality to it, done in this beautiful jet black tone. It is just a beautiful handset, beautiful numerals. There isn't any misprinting, there isn't any blotching that shouldn't be there, right down to the railroads track that has this same amount of depth to it. It is just executed very well, very crisp, and as clean as you would expect. I mean, or at least hopefully expect for this price point. Looking at the handset itself, it is thankfully just as clean. Of course, you get that beautiful heat bluing where at some angles it looks black, at some it's more this vibrant electric blue. There isn't any marks or specks on the dial itself, or the handset itself rather, which is really nice to see. Same goes for the seconds hand. Really clean, really well done QC. I will say that towards that central stack, that little pinion cap there may be a little tiny speck towards the bottom, but honestly it's not that big of a deal, and realistically they have to touch it somehow to put it on, so it's definitely forgivable. Zooming in this close, you can kind of just see what I was saying with every little layer standing on a different plane. You have the base dial, the darker gray plate, and then the light gray plate. All just very interesting. I just love how it comes together. I love the little joints you get between the two plates. The screws are done very well and high polished, and they are true screws that are functional in this watchmaking process, so hence they are not all screwed and aligned to the same angle, and you know, that's just quirky little fun. I also love the grain finishing you have on these metal portions of the dial. It also follows into the case finish of the Titalyt very well too. Overall, super clean dial, really no complaint, no real issue with QC for the most part, and it's pretty. Taking a look in natural light, and I think the watch still looks fantastic. One thing that stands out is the watch case does get a lot lighter. These kind of more brownish muted tones do come out of the color of the gray. And you also do get this really nice, sparkly, almost pearlescent finish that comes off of the metal of the case, which I think is beautiful when the sunlight really hits it. It looks great, it adds some visual uniqueness to the watch, and is nice. And other than that, you just get the very nice pure white looking dial, the blued hands pops out at some points, and it just is a nice looking watch in the light. Now when we move into the shade, the case becomes darker again, much more blacker gray. The dial and the contrast of the dial and the indices become, or the painted numerals become a lot more apparent, and it still does look great. And lastly, bringing the watch inside, you can see after that short time in the sun, the lume is pretty powerful. You can already see the dial taking on this blue tone. This is just inside lighting. It's not overly bright, but it's not overly dark as well. So you can just see how well the lume pierces through, and going down to just slightly darker, it pops, so it's pretty nice. So moving on to the case of this watch, and while not the most flashy, it actually is beautifully done. It is what they call a Tortoise case, very tonneau style. So it just has this very interesting stance where it is truly barrel shaped. It doesn't have a defined square, it's not a defined circle, it's a little bit in between the two. How it appears to my eye is the bezel on the side. Of course, it has this beautiful gentle curve to it, but they are flat. And then the bezel on the top and the bottom are very slightly angled down. And it just creates this beautiful interplay between the four sections. And the flat, of course, bezel is then contrasted by the tiny little dip down on each edge to kind of just continue that styling. And it is just gorgeous. The Titalyt finishing itself just lends to this very interesting look where, of course, it mats everything out, but it almost defines all the angles. There isn't any super shiny surfaces kind of just blasting out and drowning out the detail. You see every little line, you see the connection points between these bezel areas, you see the way they dip down in comparison to each other. You can kind of see where some areas go super black while some actually grab the light and go a little bit lighter. And it just is a changing and interesting case style, case finish, and just case construction altogether. You can even see, taking a look at the mid case, we have a little bit of a cutout portion here towards the middle where the case back comes in. And then you have the lugs on the side, which get a little bit thicker and also turn down. So like this is already a small watch with short lugs that wears well. They still almost aggressively focus on the ergonomics to make sure it wears very close to the wrist and very comfortably. Something too I didn't really mention in the dial section, because I guess it's kind of part of the case, but also kind of part of the dial or contributes to the dial, is the sapphire crystal itself. The crystal is actually shaped in the exact same shape as the case, which is very hard to do for sapphire. It's not square, it's not circle, it's this same torteau kind of tourneau shape. And I love what they've done with it. It obviously makes it a little bit harder for water resistance and gasketry and all that stuff, but it very much completes the look of the watch. You get all these very interesting angles and then contrasted by the very defined circle of just the time-telling area of the watch. It does come together pretty beautifully. You have so many shapes working in harmony. The strap itself is done very well too. It's of course rubber, has this like grained finish to it, very soft to the touch, super silky. On the back side you have FP stylized to give some aeration to the wrist and just general comfort, and obviously customization as well to give it that FP Journe touch to it. We of course have a fold over deployant here. It pushes in and secures very noticeably. There's a nice feel and action to it and just very nice click. So really sturdy. You definitely know it's on. You definitely know it's not going to be falling off. And realistically and surprisingly, I would say, it's not too hard to pull off the clasp. Usually when you have a clasp like this, which only secures once, it's not a double fold over, anything like that, and it's not a push button to release, it sometimes is a little tough to get it out, but this is super fluid, super easy to do, and it just feels premium realistically. Of course, have a signed FP Journe buckle here, done in that same Titalyt finish, which is nice to see that it didn't skimp out there. And what's nice too is the watch features quick release. Now the lugs are super close to the case, so realistically this is kind of only made for the Journe rubber straps, and it is a 16mm lug, so you would have to get something custom made if you were going for anything else. But again, you need something super thin on the kind of edge of the strap to be able to even fit the watch. Like I have 16mm other silicone straps and it will not fit on this watch. If I take the strap off, you can tell there's this little pronged portion that leads into the middle of the case there. So it's just one of those things where it is a little bit integrated. You can just see how close the lug holes are to the case. But what's nice is the strap itself is pretty easy to put on. You have this one channel that guides the little edges. You put the little bars in that channel there on the bottom of the watch. You try to line up that little pronged piece towards the middle of the case. Then you just push up, wait till the strap clicks in, and then boom, it's on. So it is nice. I think that Journe offers a lot of first-party rubber options. I believe they make it in about 5 different colors. So you have versatility there. At least they don't leave you alone and just say, hey, you get one rubber strap and I hope it lasts and I hope you like it. To be fair, I do really like this monotone gray on gray look, but if you want black, if you want green, if you want white, if you want blue, like you can have all those options. And I like that versatility. I like the fact that they offer that variability. What I do really love about the case back here, and you see it with all Journes, is just how deeply engraved all the text is done. It is more engraved than I've ever seen on another watch. It's super deep into the case. It just gives it a premium feel. It looks good, it looks interesting, and I dig it. I think that's nice that Journe goes the extra mile to do that. Of course, it's also cool to see that they decorate the battery cover in that same gold that they use for all the other Journes. They don't skimp out on that. They make it feel as premium as possible. You have the little heart there saying that's the microprocessor, that's the beating heart of the watch in a sense. It is just something that was obviously taken to have some care, have Cote de Genève finishing on it, to appear pretty, to appear functional. And that's also why this has an open case back instead of being closed and hidden away. They are proud of this movement and they're proud to show it. Then one thing to note before moving on to how this watch wears, one, of course, yes, we do have the screw down crown, but setting it is kind of weird feeling. When you pop out the crown, of course, it hacks, which is nice, but you get this very mechanical, like weird, almost grindy noise. It does happen with other high-end quartz like that. When I set the Cartier, it has a similar sound to it, but it is a little quieter, a little bit duller. This is more screechy, a little bit less premium feeling. really, you know, there are some concessions, I guess, when you're doing this kind of technology and using this power saving stuff and making the efficiency what it is. But it's just something to note. Not a feel I expected to have in the quartz watch, but it's there. I'll put it kind of next to the mic so you can hear it more. If you go fast, it's very, very screechy and really kind of unpleasant. So it almost makes you feel like you're breaking the watch and something weird is happening. So, you know, it is what it is. So moving on to how this wears, earlier I was of course wearing the Cartier tank, and we'll compare them. Here we have the 40mm Journe sitting on my 6.5-inch wrist. When I wear it a little bit higher like this, it is closer to a 6-inch wrist, so you can see still wears really well, very proportional. It's one of those things where they call this a 40mm Titalyt watch, whereas realistically it is, you know, 35mm in actual case dimension. 40mm is realistically closer to the lug-to-lug length, but with that being said, it wears super well, doesn't feel too dainty. What I do like about it is it's a dressy sports watch in a sense. It's all grayed out, it's very matte, it's super under the radar, but it has that versatility of the scratch-resistant coating, the water resistance, the versatility of that quartz movement that's always going to be running for, you know, basically 18 years. It is a super fun watch to wear on the wrist. It's really thin, which I do like. It sits well on the wrist. It's light, it's comfortable. Of course, the titanium helps in that wearability aspect. Looking from the side view there, again, it just sits really well onto the wrist. The rubber strap is super comfortable, which I mean, you know, you would hope it would be, because that's a kind of a proprietary system in a sense. It has to be on this strap, or at least that's kind of the way to wear this watch. So it's nice to see that the first party option is really nice. I believe the straps themselves are about $500 a pop. It is of course not the cheapest thing in the world, but I think it is pretty fair for what you're getting. It is a nice wearing watch, accentuated by the comfortable rubber strap, and it is just a nice package altogether. If there is one thing this watch does incredibly, incredibly well, it's the lume. You can see this thing's a torch. It can like even light up my hand. If I bring in the classic Timex, the Journe is brighter than the Timex. You have a, thankfully, $18,000 watch, which is brighter than the $50 watch. Good to know. So it's awesome that the lume is this good. It lasts for a very long time. It's very bright, incredibly legible because it's backlit. So you see the entire watch, you see the hands, you see the seconds hands. So this is probably one of the most functional lumes that I've ever seen on any watch, which is awesome because it's nice that they didn't half-ass it and they just really made a cool product all around. So pros and cons of this watch, and I think one of the biggest pros for me is going to be the size as well as just the case shape. This kind of tonneau styling is just unique. It has a lot of curves and architecture you don't see with, to be fair, most case shapes, but it's also just not a shape and styling you see very often in modern watches. There's some vintage things that have this kind of uniqueness about it, but yeah, you don't see many modern brands doing something like this, and I like that. It's different, it's unique, it's visually interesting. I also love that they make this smaller version in the quote-unquote 40, which is really a 35. Yes, it's quote-unquote meant for ladies, and this is the size originally meant for a lady's watch, but again, it's 35mm, so if you like that size, you can wear it. And I like it a little bit more compared to the 48mm brother, I think they call it, because that one is definitely more sporty leaning. You have the screws on the outside of the case, whereas with this one, the case is just very clean. You have the screws on the dial, and to me, that looks a lot cleaner. That looks a lot more elegant. It feels like a sporty dress watch rather than a sporty sports watch. Another pro I have for this watch is I think the Titalyt coating. I just do think it's cool you have this extra coating on the titanium that makes it more scratches and that gives it this more utilitarian kind of look and just a more unique finish that you don't really see anywhere else. I mean, it is proprietary to Journe, which is cool. Another big pro for this watch, I think, is the lume. It's something that I was probably the most surprised about with the watch. I don't typically use lume or get interested in lume at all, but this is one of those cases where you see how good it is and you're like, okay, this is almost like what lume is supposed to be, and this is how functional it can be, and this is how arguably beautiful it can be. This is one of the few watches where I can be in a not pitch black room and the lume is still active and still visibly glowing. And it was just a very unique experience. It looked cool and I enjoyed it. And my last pro, and I think one of the biggest pros for this watch, is going to be the battery life. Of course, yes, it's a quartz watch, which some people will not like, but I do think the fact that they took the kind of standard quartz formula of like a 3-year battery or a 4-year battery or 5-year battery and made it to a really 10-year battery and 18 if you're not really using it every day. that's pretty awesome. It's cool that you have a watch that has that longevity to it, that doesn't have to go into service all the time, that can really be that dedicated grab and go watch, as well as be something that is just fun, reliable, accurate, consistent. When you leave it sitting for a while, again, once you pick it back up, you get that nice spring to life action movement from the hands, and it's just a kind of enjoyable experience. So I think giving it such a long life per battery is pretty fun. It makes the watch much more useful and much less of a headache for anyone who wants to kind of daily wear this watch or wants to have a close to daily wear experience with this, because again, you can just get much more use out of it. And although I don't know exactly, the watch will likely probably be gone a couple of months if it has to go off to service, because watches of this kind of luxury status have to usually do that. It is nice that you don't have to wait months at a time every 3 years. Rather, you can just wait, give or take, a decade, and then a couple of months the watch will be gone. Now, moving on to cons, and one of the ones I'll just say up front is I don't like the price. I mean, as of 2024, this watch is $16,000. When I originally went on the list for this watch 4 years ago, the watch was $12,000. It's one of those things where the watch will only continue to go up in price. The watch will only continue to get more expensive. And I think there's going to be a point where the coolness factor of this watch for the money kind of runs out for some people. There will always be those with tons of money, and the 16 or 18, 20, 25, whatever this watch ends up being, is not a crazy, amount for them, and that's great. This is still a fantastic watch, and this still is a really fun piece to have in the collection, I think. But for people who this might be your most expensive watch, or people who this will be one of your most expensive watches, or a big portion of your watch budget, the higher up in price this watch goes, the least attractive it becomes as an item, as a talking point, as something that almost deserves to be there compared to other things in the watch market. At $16,000, this starts to become a little bit of a hesitant purchase, a little bit of a like, do I really want this watch, and is it worth this much compared to everything else I can get for that price? Another big con that I have with the watch personally is the lack of strap availability for it. Yes, Journe offers a lot of first-party options, but you only get rubber and you only get that Journe strap. You can't go out and really buy your own 16mm strap because it's pretty much a proprietary system. The lugs are very close to the case. Most straps probably will not fit this. You would have to get something very specialized or pretty custom made to be able to fit the case, which is a little bit annoying. With that being said, I think it would be nice if Journe offered other non-rubber options. I know they see it kind of as a sports watch and the rubber makes sense, yada yada, but I just do think more strap options would be cool. Another con that I have with the watch is realistically just the availability of it. They make, I think about 400, maybe 500 of these a year, give or take, and it's not easy to get one. Like I said, I waited 4 years and now it's here, but not everyone has the luxury of either being close to a boutique or having a relationship with a boutique or just being able to get one or see one in the first place. I've definitely had conversations with people who basically go, hey, I love this watch, but I don't live close to a Journe boutique. They say they won't put me on the list because I can't come in, kind of thing. And that's unfortunate. It sucks that it's kind of out of reach for a lot of people, and you do have to play really kind of a game to be able to get something like this. I don't think it should be as hard to get one, but it becomes one of those things. A definition of luxury is scarcity, and this is undoubtedly a luxury product, so it's a give and take. And really my last con for the watch, and the thing that probably surprised me the most, is the sound of the movement when changing the time on the watch. It's very screechy, it does not feel premium at all, and it was pretty shocking. Again, like I have my Cartier Tank, which has a similar kind of higher end quartz movement in it. Again, it's not something of this caliber, and it's definitely not something of this price point, but that feels a lot better. It feels more buttery, it feels less, cheap in a sense. So the feeling of this watch movement is not pleasant. It doesn't feel good in the hand. It doesn't feel like a luxury product with the time setting. Is that big of an issue, since this is a quartz watch that, quote unquote lasts for probably a decade, if not more, and you probably won't have to be setting it that often? Probably less of an issue then. But, it's one of those things where, like, if you travel a lot with it and you're going to be changing time zones, when you do go to change the time, it does not feel good. It feels weird. I don't know if that's something that can be improved or how they would improve it, but I do think it's something they should look into because it does sour the experience a little bit, I think. So final thoughts on this watch, and I do actually really like it. There was a lot of things about it that I didn't know how I would feel about the watch, or I didn't know how it would appear in person. But in person, there's a lot of surprising depth to the watch. There's a lot to just like. I do enjoy the Titalyt finish. I enjoy the kind of blasted effect it gives to the watch. The dial itself is fantastic in person. The quality of the dial, the quality of the lume, the case, the wearability, the way the case shines and just looks and feels, and the architectural feel of the watch case in general. It is an awesome package. It does feel like a premium watch. But then there are aspects of the watch that don't feel as good in a sense. You know, the movement being one of them, the price being one of them. It is, I think, undoubtedly an expensive watch, and there's no two ways about that. And it's not going to be worth it to, I would honestly say, most people. I like it in the sense of it's kind of like the ultimate form of an everyday watch. It has ruggedness, it has the ability to, you know, always be accurate, have a super amount of longevity to it. It's an easy grab and go option, and it's versatile enough to where I think it works with most things. That kind of gray on gray monotone combo, but with the pure white dial, it's pretty good looking, I think. And because of the size, it can easily be dressed up or down. Don't think it looks out of place with a suit. And the rubber strap isn't obnoxious. It's not like perforated or loud in a sense. So it can be used dressed up. But are there plenty of other perfect everyday watches that cost less than $16,000? Absolutely. I think a lot of watch collecting becomes climbing a ladder and being, oh, the next step, the next ring is probably better. That independent watchmaker is probably better. Their product is probably more interesting. I'm getting what I pay for. And it's one of those things where there is undoubtedly diminishing returns in terms of luxury watches. What you get for 1, 2, 3, 4,000 is a majority of it you get for everything else. Sure, you get maybe some designs that don't exist elsewhere. Sure, you maybe get some materials you don't get elsewhere. But you have to find out at the end of the day what you value, what your pocketbook can withstand, and what kind of collecting you enjoy. Like, I enjoy $150 micro brands and AliExpress watches. You know, that's fine. So that doesn't mean this $16,000 watch isn't worth it. It's just, what do you consider worth it? So at the end of the day, I do really like this watch. I enjoy wearing it, and I do think there are aspects about it which relatively justify the price point. There's a lot of cool engineering that goes into this watch. There's a lot of cool materials that go into this watch, and thankfully, at the end of the day, if nothing else, it is good looking. But anyway, that's enough of my rambling. Let me know what you think. Let me know why all quartz watches are bad and no quartz watch should be more than $50 and all that good stuff. Yeah, let me know what you think about it. Hope you got something out of the video. Thank you as always for watching, and I'll see you in another one.